Okay, so now going to the an even softer B pencil, so not an HB, but you can pick up something like, a 4, 5, or 6B, or depending on how much of a difference you want in the value, you could go up to an 8B for a very dark value. And what I'm doing here is I'm indicating fur without drawing every single piece of fur, right? You don't need to do that. The eye is going to fill in the rest of that information. So as long as some of your pencil lines are feeling like fur, at a glance, it's going to look like there's more fur than there is. And that's, I think, an important thing to keep in mind as you're drawing an animal is you don't need to worry about all the detail. You just need to indicate the essentially what the fur is doing. So like the direction it's pointing, the general shape of it. And as long as you get that in one area, it's going to start to feel like fur in a larger area. So now I'm going back and erasing some of the key lines because I don't want those to come through in the finished drawing. And then using the contour lines as my guide now. So this is where, keep in mind, right, like I mentioned earlier, you don't want to put those lines down too dark, otherwise they won't erase. And the reason for that is the H pencils are a harder lead and they dig into the paper, which drives the graphite down on the paper. So you can't put too much pressure on those. So I am a right-handed person, and the reason I'm mentioning this is I start on the left side of this cat picture. And the reason is because my right hand is touching the paper on the right side. And if I were to lay down the graphite on the right side, it would be smearing all over the place, right? So I work from left to right. So if you're left-handed, I'm not sure that would, it's up to you how you go about it, but that's just the consideration that I use is just to avoid the smearing. And I'll use a piece of paper later on, you'll see, to protect the graphite on that right side, but it's just something to keep in mind of what side you start on because you don't want the lead to smear all over your drawing. And the other reason I start on the left side is the complexity of the patterns on this cat and basically most cats. It's pretty complex, right? I mean, they're beautiful animals, and that the patterns the fur creates it's complicated, right? And how do you lay that down in a pencil sketch? So the method I use here is I start with one side of the cat, so the left side, and observe the patterns going on with the fur and get that down. And then basically I will mirror that to the right side. And I'll mirror it based on what I put down on the left side, not what I see in the source image. And it just makes it a lot simpler. And I'm starting with, using that heavier grade B pencil for the darker value. And I'm going right into the patterns that I see in the cat's fur. And as I'm doing this, I'm not trying to be super literal to, oh, it didn't exactly curve that way, or that stripe's not exactly there. It's a little, it's an inch to the left or to above the eye. Like, you don't have to be that precise. You're just looking at the overall feel of the pattern and trying to communicate that in your drawing, but you're reacting to what you have laid down on the paper and making the pattern work within that, if that makes sense. So following the curves and the structures that you've laid down and letting the patterns work with what you have on the paper versus literally in the source image. Okay, so now more structure here to the eye, going for the darkest darks first. And I think it's fun to go for the eyes first because you start to see a little bit of the personality of the creature that you're rendering here. And that's just kind of a fun thing to see right away. So the box I'd put in there is for the highlight that will be coming off the eyeball. Laying down darker shade at the top of the eye and then easing up the pressure as I go down. So you can start to see how that already has a round structure to it. If you're returning to the channel, thanks for being part of this growing community. I really appreciate it. Let me know below which drawing skill you'd like to improve over the next few months. So now I'm getting into the pattern of the fur again, right? Following what's on in my drawing versus literally what I'm seeing, but getting the spirit of what I'm seeing, I guess is a better way to say that. And I'm not, so the overall head here, I'm not concerned yet about the overall form of the head, meaning I'm not laying shading down to communicate the form of the head. It's strictly just the pattern of the fur, and that's it. The form will come when I get to the right side. And this is just the method I use because it makes it less complicated for me. So these patterns I'm laying down, I will essentially then mirror that on the right side when I'm done. So getting to a little bit of the darker fur that's on the inside of the ear. And that already starts to give that ear some form. So now, since I do have some pencil laid down on the right side, I put this piece of paper over it so my hand's not smearing that. So just let these pattern lines flow is really some advice I would give you here, right? Don't feel, this is not a scientific medical illustration. It's a fun rendering of a cat. So no one's going to hold you to, oh my gosh, the pattern is not exactly what it looks like on my pet cat. Like you're just trying to get the feel of it. And you want these lines to flow in the direction of the way the fur is on the head. Right? So you wouldn't, meaning you wouldn't put lines down that are just vertical or just horizontal because that's not the way the fur is growing, right on the skin and what you're seeing. So now putting in some darker value here for where the whiskers come in. And again, that'll be mirrored on the right side, so just worry about the left. And then going into the nose area. And you'll notice too, I'm not drawing the nostrils, I'm just putting in a dark value to indicate the nostrils, which again is that's another way to simplify how you're creating these anatomical structures. And now going into the shading to give it a form, keeping it darker on the edges and then lightening up the pressure on the inside to give it a rounded feel. So you can see how these lines at the bottom, which are still part of the pattern, are indicating the form of the head, right? So it's kind of serving a dual purpose. So this cat's starting to come to life a little bit. I decided to give him a little bit of a grumpy, somewhat sinister kind of feel, based on the way the lines of the mouth are pointing down. You know, the pupils of the eyes are very slim versus rounded. So here I'm just adding a little bit of a middle value on the fur so that it's not just dark and light. It gives it a little bit more of a sense of realism and helps those darker stripes to feel like they're more integrated into into the overall pattern of the fur. Now, so you can see here now why we left that smaller oval for the mouth area, because it's a good reference as you lay down these little darker hints of fur around the edges to help that mouth area feel like it's protruding out towards the viewer. Just a slight rounded feel to it. And these dots are an interesting feature because they actually are colored fur that you see on the cat. So just part of that overall pattern. Something to keep in mind as you're rendering like this is be cognizant of how the line finishes. In other words, when you finish the line at the bottom, in this example, the bottom left, how that integrates into the overall feel of the drawing. Right? You're not drawing a hard edge bottom, cutting off the body. It's the line just kind of tapers down in a nice subtle fashion and feels visually pleasing to the overall drawing. going a little bit darker now on the top part of the eyeball to really help that round and feel like it's going back into space, and the eye has more of an oval shape to it. You can really see how that starts to feel pretty realistic now. Same thing with the nose, same idea, darkening the outer edges even further. Okay, so now we're going to the right side and just starting to mirror what we have down on the left side, right? I'm just observing what I have on the left side and doing the same texture and shading and pattern for the most part on the right side. Not, it's still referencing the reference image, but not being super literal about it, because at this point, what I have down on the left side may not be exact to the reference image, right? So to make it more realistic, it's better to mirror what I have down on the paper on the left side. And again, going for the darkest darks first, not going for form necessarily on any object yet, just getting the texture and the pattern of the fur down. So the eye position here on the right side is not exact anatomically. Like it's slightly larger. It's it's up to the right a little bit more than it needs to be, and not angled exactly the same as the eye on the left. But I'm leaving it that way because I think it's going to add to the character of this cat, which it just seems he's got a little bit of a mischievous quality to him, I feel. So having the eye slightly off just feels right to me. If I wanted this to be more realistic to what I'm seeing, I would fix the eye position right now. Obviously, I wouldn't go in and finish it the way I'm finishing it here. And that would, if I were to have it positioned exactly the way it is on the left eye, right, a little bit more anatomically correct, the feel of the cat would be very different. It would just feel a little less it would feel a little less mischievous, maybe a little bit cuter, if you will. This guy feels kind of like an alley cat. And that's all something that I had an instructor who used to say, that it's your artistic license to do that, right? It's your drawing, it's your piece of art. You can do what you want with it, right? And that's the fun of art and of drawing. Obviously, if you have an interest in eventually doing, pet portraits or commissions, for example, that's not something you can do, but that's okay. Like, it's just, the important thing is, if you're able to observe if something is off or not accurate to your source image, that's the biggest hurdle, because if you can see that, you can fix it. I'm just choosing not to fix it. So now I'm going in and just pulling out some areas that I've felt need a little bit more hit of a lighter value. And this is because I'm looking at the overall drawing and trying to start now to communicate a little bit more sense of form in the overall head. So meaning my light source here is coming from the left side of the cat. So the right side ultimately is going to be darker than the left side. So going in now, I have the rough pattern laid out and going in and hitting it with the darker 8B pencil and bringing the pattern out further. So now this is where looking at the overall form, so bringing darker overall shading to that right side of the face, but at the same time allowing the pattern to still come through. By the way, if you're enjoying this demo and would like additional instruction, monthly drawing challenges, critiques, and one-on-one mentoring and lessons via Zoom, I've created a Patreon studio where we continue this kind of work more in depth, with community interaction and a lot of fun along the way. Scan the QR code you see here, or click the link below. I'd love to see you there. Now let's get back to the drawing. And again, as I taper these lines off the edge, I'm indicating fur, but not drawing a lot of individual pieces or hairs of fur. Just trying to get across this kind of roughness of the coat, right? This doesn't feel like a cat that is brushed or groomed regularly. It's got a little bit of a roughness to it. Darkening around. Remember that second oval that we drew in the beginning to communicate the mouth and snout area. I don't know if that's what it's called on a cat, but getting those two areas above the mouth, those kind of bulbous areas, to have some form to them. And then the same with the bottom part of the mouth. Now going into the whiskers, and this is where you can really let the personality come through, like having these kind of off kilter, right? On the right, they kind of poke out the way they normally would, and on the left side, they're kind of pointing down. He just makes them feel a little rougher. So now this drawing is getting to the stage where you have to start to develop a sense of, is it done or not? And that's always a tough question, right? You know, pencil is more forgiving than other mediums as far as allowing you to go back into it and work it, right? Like you can't do that with things like watercolor. But you can, it's easy to overwork a pencil drawing, right? In general, less is going to be more, meaning you want the lines to be as efficient as possible, meaning you want less line and shading to communicate more versus more line and more shading. It's just more aesthetically pleasing. And this drawing is getting to the point where you kind of want to just leave it. Like it's starting to feel, pretty realistic. there's personality coming through in this guy. And it's getting to a stage where, yeah, I could keep working it, but what's really going to get me? And it's a hard thing for you to get a sense for it. The only way to get a sense for it is to just keep drawing. The more you draw, the more you're going to get a feel for what your style is and when you need to say something is done. And it's very individualistic. What I do recommend is when you get to that point is, just get up and let it go and step away from the piece for, a good half hour and don't look at it again. And the reason for that is you might observe something that you missed, like something that needs to be fixed, and then you can go back in. And what I noticed on this one was when you look at his left ear, I don't know why I keep calling this cat a he, but when you look at the left ear, the amount of the white space in the bottom left of the ear just feels off, right? It's not indicating or feeling like it's creating a form of the ear. It just feels like I forgot to shade that area, to be honest. So that's something I go back into and fix. And it's easy to miss things like that unless you step away. The other thing I noticed was and the video cuts this off, but the top of the left ear, the height of that is a little bit oddly out of whack compared to the right ear. So what I did was I just erased the top point of fur to make it feel a little bit more balanced, even though it adds to the roughness of this cat. Adding just a hit of darker line underneath the whiskers so they start to pop off a little bit better. So you can see how now the right side of the face feels like it's more in shadow, and it gives the overall head a good sense of form to it. Now I'm going back in and pulling out the highlight as much as possible on the pupils or on the eyeballs. And using a kneaded eraser is great for that because you can roll it to a point, which allows you to get pretty precise. So adding that highlight to the eyeball really goes a long way to put a nice finishing touch on it and make it feel realistic. And then the same thing, pulling out just a little bit of the graphite and some of the fur on that left side to make it feel overall like that side of its face is lighter. Even though the fur is not white, right? It's just helping to communicate form. And that's where you don't need to worry about being literal, right? It's not white fur, it's just adding to the form of the face.